I found the pod on a Tuesday morning while running diagnostics on the satellite array, not where it should have been, not in any orbital path that made sense, just sitting there, 17 kilometers above nominal geosynchronous altitude, drifting at 0.03 meters per second in a trajectory that violated every model we had. I'm a systems analyst for Orbital Dynamics Limited. I monitor debris fields, track decommissioned satellites, flag potential collisions. It's methodical work, predictable. Every object up there follows rules written in mathematics so pure they might as well be scripture. Mass, velocity, gravitational influence. Everything behaves exactly as it should, except this thing. The radar signature was wrong, too dense for its size. The spectral analysis showed materials that didn't match any known spacecraft composition, and the heat signature made no sense at all. It was warm, not sun-warmed, not residual heat from atmospheric friction. Actively warm, like something inside was generating temperature. I flagged it for review, sent the data packet to my supervisor, marked it Priority 2, unusual object requiring classification. Then I went back to monitoring a cluster of dead weather satellites that were supposed to decay and burn up over the Pacific in 48 hours. That should have been the end of my involvement. 3 hours later, Chen from navigation called my direct line. Chen never calls anyone. He sends emails with subject lines in all caps and considers verbal communication a waste of bandwidth. The object you flagged, he said, no greeting, no preamble. How certain are you about the trajectory data? Completely certain. Why? Because according to your numbers, it didn't come from Earth orbit. It came from somewhere else and slowed down to match our orbital velocity. I pulled up my logs, checked the calculations again. That's not possible. I know, Chen said. That's why I'm calling. They assembled a team. Not publicly, no press releases, no official mission designation, just 8 people pulled. From various agencies and contractors, sworn to confidentiality agreements that ran 17 pages long. I was included because I'd found it first and because my security clearance was already current. We watched the pod for 6 days before approaching it. The object maintained its impossible orbit, neither rising nor falling, its thermal signature fluctuating in patterns that suggested biological processes. Respiration, maybe, or a heartbeat. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the astrobiologist they'd brought in from JPL, spent 72 hours analyzing the spectral data before she spoke to anyone. When she finally joined our video conference, her face looked like she hadn't slept since receiving the assignment. It's a craft, she said. Artificial construction. The outer shell is a polymer I can't identify, but it's definitely manufactured. And there's something alive inside. The room went silent. Not the dramatic silence of movies, the real kind. The kind where everyone forgets to breathe. How alive? Someone asked. Vital signs consistent with a large mammal under severe physiological stress. Elevated heart rate, irregular respiration. If I had to guess based on the thermal imaging, I'd say whatever's in there is dying. They sent up a retrieval crew, not NASA, not any official space agency. A private contractor that specialized in satellite recovery, people who were used to working quietly. The mission launched from Kourou under the designation of a routine maintenance operation. 41 hours later, they had the pod secured in the cargo bay of the International Space Station. I watched the approach on a live feed that was being transmitted to exactly 12 screens worldwide. The pod was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 3 meters long, smooth and dark, with no visible seams or propulsion systems. It looked organic and manufactured at the same time, like someone had grown a spacecraft instead of building one. The retrieval specialist, a woman named Torres with 23 years of EVA experience, anchored herself next to it and ran her gloved hand along its surface. It's warm, she said. I can feel it through the glove. Can you find an access point? Mission control. A voice I didn't recognize. Looking. There's no obvious hatch. No panels. No. Wait. The feed showed her hand stopping at a section of the hull. Something's happening. The surface is changing. It's like it knows I'm here. And then the pod opened. Not mechanically, not with hinges or hydraulics. It simply separated, the material flowing apart like liquid, and inside was something that made every person watching that feed reconsider their understanding of what was possible. She was humanoid. That was the word that kept appearing in the reports afterward, humanoid, because she had 2 arms and 2 legs and a torso and a head, and that basic architecture was familiar enough to let our brains process what we were seeing without completely shutting down. But she wasn't human. Her skin was translucent in places, showing structures underneath that weren't quite organs and weren't quite machinery. Her hands had 6 fingers. Her face had features that almost made sense until you looked directly at them and realized the proportions were wrong in ways you couldn't quite articulate. And she was pregnant. Obviously, undeniably pregnant. Her abdomen distended in a way that transcended species. She wasn't moving. "Is she alive?" Okonkwo's voice, tight with something between terror and wonder. Torres checked the instruments mounted on her suit. "I'm reading vital signs. Faint, but they're there." They brought her into the station, cleared an entire module, set up medical monitoring equipment that was designed for humans, and tried to make sense of the data it was giving them. Her heart rate, if that's what the rhythmic pulses were, was 43 beats per minute and dropping. Her body temperature was falling. And something was wrong with the pregnancy. The fetus, if that's what it was, showed no movement, no independent vital signs. I wasn't there. I was 1,500 kilometers below, watching feeds and reading reports and trying to understand how my Tuesday morning routine had led to this. Dr. James Cartwright, the xenobiologist they'd pulled out of retirement, spent 19 hours examining her before he sent his preliminary assessment. I read it 4 times, looking for words that would make it make sense. Subject: appears to be in critical condition. Pregnancy is late term, possibly overdue. Fetal distress is evident. Without intervention, both mother and offspring will expire within 24 to 48 hours. Problem: we have no idea what intervention means for a biology we don't understand. They tried anyway. Okonkwo and Cartwright worked with the station's medical officer to devise treatments based on analogous human conditions. They regulated her temperature, provided glucose and saline solutions through an IV system. They had to adapt 3 times before finding a vein or something like a vein. Monitored her constantly. She didn't wake up. 71 hours after retrieval, her vital signs crashed. The fetal heartbeat stopped. And just as they were preparing to declare her dead, she opened her eyes. I was off duty when it happened. Got the call at 2 in the morning. Scrambled back to the operations center and pulled up the feed to see her sitting upright in the medical bay, surrounded by equipment she was systematically disconnecting from her body. Should we restrain her? Someone in mission control. With what? Torres, still on the station. She's pulling IV needles out, like they're splinters. I don't think restraints are going to make a difference. Okonkwo approached slowly, hands visible, body language as non-threatening as possible in 0 gravity. Can you understand me? The alien turned her head, looked directly at the camera, and spoke. The sound made no sense. It wasn't language as we understood it. It was layered. Multiple tones happening simultaneously. Harmonics that suggested more than one vocal structure operating at once. The audio equipment tried to capture it and mostly failed, producing a recording that sounded like damaged data. Then she switched to English. I understand, she said. The accent was impossible to place. The rhythm was wrong, but the words were clear. I have been listening, learning. Your language is complex but manageable. The room I was in went absolutely silent. How long have you been conscious? Okonkwo, managing to keep her voice steady. Since you brought me inside. I needed to understand before I could speak. I needed to know if you would help or harm. We've been trying to help. I know. That is why I'm speaking now. She looked down at her abdomen, placed both six-fingered hands across it. My child is dead, has been dead for 6 of your days. I have kept my body functioning to protect the message, but I cannot sustain this much longer. Message? Okonkwo leaned closer. What message? The reason I came. The reason I crossed the distance your species has not yet learned to cross. I came because someone told me I would find understanding here. I came because of what you call Jesus. I felt something cold settle in my chest. The word didn't fit. Didn't belong in this context. An alien in a space station, dying with her unborn child, speaking about Jesus made no sense in any framework I had for understanding the world. I don't understand, Okonkwo said. Neither did I, not at first. The alien's breathing was becoming labored. I am dying. The message must be preserved. Please. I need something to record with. Something that will last. They brought her a tablet. Standard commercial model. She held it in her 6-fingered hands and stared at the screen for almost a minute before she began to speak. My name is not pronounceable in your language. The closest approximation would be Vrelith. I come from a world you have not discovered. We have been watching your species for 12 of your generations. Watching and waiting to see if you would develop the capacity to understand what you have. Most species do not. They find the relics, and they study them, and they categorize them as mythology, as fiction, as stories told by primitives who did not understand the universe. She paused, steadied herself against the wall. But you are different. Some of you, not many, but some. You look at the stories, and you see something true underneath, something that transcends the details. The man you call Jesus, the things attributed to him, the teachings, the claims. You have built civilizations on the foundation of his words. What does that have to do with you? Okonkwo asked quietly. Everything. Vrelith's eyes, which were too large and the wrong color, showed something that looked enough like pain to be recognizable. Because he was real, and he was not what you think he was. My hands were shaking. I gripped the edge of my desk hard enough to hurt. Jesus was not human. Not entirely. He was like me, like my child, a hybrid, born of a human mother and something else, something older, something that has been visiting your world for longer than your recorded history. The silence in the operations center was suffocating. You're saying Jesus was an alien, someone in the room, I didn't see who. I am saying he was the offspring of someone who came from beyond your world, yes, as were others throughout your history. Teachers, prophets, individuals with knowledge that could not have originated from your level of development. They came to guide, to prepare, to see if humanity would be ready when the time came. Ready for what? Vrelith looked directly into the camera again. To join the rest of us. To understand that you are not alone, that you have never been alone, that the divine presence you have sought in your religions and your philosophies is real, but not in the way you imagined. It is not above you. It is among you. It has always been among you. She touched her abdomen again. I came here because I am one of the last. Our species is dying, a plague we cannot cure. A genetic degradation we cannot stop. We sought to preserve ourselves through hybridization with other species, including yours. I carried a child conceived with a human father I met on Earth 3 years ago. He never knew what I was. I appeared human to him. It is a technology we possess, a temporary adaptation. Where is he now? Okonkwo asked. Dead. The plague killed him 6 months into my pregnancy. It is spreading faster than we anticipated. I left Earth to return to my people for the birth, but complications arose. The child died in transit. I should have died as well. I would have, but I sustained myself artificially to complete the journey, to deliver the message. What message? That it is time. Humanity has reached the threshold. You have the technology. You have the potential. You have individuals who understand, instinctively, that there is more to existence than the material. Jesus tried to teach this, so did others. But the message was distorted, changed, weaponized into religions that divided instead of united. That is not what was intended. Vrelith's breathing was getting worse. The monitors were screaming alerts. The message is this: you are ready to know the truth. That life in this universe is connected in ways your science is only beginning to understand. That consciousness is not a product of biology, but something fundamental to reality itself. That what you call God is real, but it is not a being. It is a field, a presence, a fundamental force that expresses itself through life wherever life emerges. Jesus understood this. He tried to explain it in terms his contemporaries could grasp. Love, unity, the kingdom of God within you, not metaphor. Truth. She was fading. I could see it happening in real time. My child would have carried genetic markers from both our species, would have been proof of the connection. But the child is dead, and I am dying. So the proof must be the message itself. You must decide if you believe it. Why should we? Okonkwo's voice was gentle. Why should we believe any of this? Because it explains everything you have never been able to explain. The gaps in your evolutionary record, the sudden leaps in capability, the persistent reports throughout history of visitors from the sky, the shared mythologies across cultures that had no contact, the teachings of Jesus that seemed too advanced for their time. All of it has been us, guiding, teaching, interbreeding, trying to elevate your species to the point where you could join the greater community of conscious beings. She looked at the tablet in her hands. I am recording this. All of it. My biometric data, genetic samples, everything you need to verify what I am telling you. Study it, test it, apply your scientific method. You will find that I am not from Earth, that my biology contains elements that should not exist in your evolutionary lineage. And when you have verified that, consider the possibility that everything I have said about Jesus is also true. What do you want us to do with this information? Okonkwo asked. Whatever you choose. That is the point. Free will, the capacity to choose. That is what separates species that are ready from those that are not. Jesus taught free will, taught choice, taught that the path to enlightenment was individual, not collective. We cannot force you to accept this. We can only offer it and wait to see what you do. Her body was shutting down. The medical officer was trying to intervene, but Vrelith waved her away. One more thing, the most important thing. She looked directly into the camera one final time. Jesus did not die and resurrect in the way your texts describe. He was retrieved by his people, by our people. He completed his mission and returned to them. The resurrection was real, but it was not supernatural. It was technology you do not yet possess, the ability to repair biological damage, to restore life. He appeared to his followers afterward to prove that death is not final, that consciousness persists, that everything he taught about eternal life was literal, truth. Where is he now? The question came from someone in mission control, where all consciousness goes when biology ends, back to the field, the source, what you call God. He is there, as is everyone who has ever lived. Consciousness is eternal. Biology is temporary. That was his entire message. And we have been trying to help you understand it for 2,000 years. Vrelith closed her eyes. I am tired. I have delivered what I came to deliver. Please preserve it. Share it. Let humanity decide. She stopped breathing 43 seconds later. The medical officer tried resuscitation, tried everything. But whatever biology sustained Vrelith, it was too different from ours. She died in the medical bay of the International Space Station with 3 witnesses and 12 remote viewers watching it happen. They performed an autopsy, full genetic analysis, material, sampling, everything. The data came back over the course of 3 weeks, and every test confirmed what Vrelith had said. Her biology was not terrestrial. Her genetic structure contained base pairs that didn't exist in any Earth organism. Her organs operated on principles that violated known biochemistry. And the dead fetus she carried showed genetic markers from 2 species, one of which was definitely human. The data was classified, buried under layers of security clearances and non-disclosure agreements. The official explanation for the pod retrieval was a malfunctioning satellite, requiring special handling. The 12 people who knew the truth were dispersed, reassigned to different projects, strongly encouraged to forget what they'd seen. But they gave us the recording, Vrelith's message, the full version. 2 hours and 17 minutes of her speaking, explaining, offering data and context and proof. I've watched it 47 times. I don't know what to believe. I was raised Catholic, lapsed, but the framework is still there. Jesus as the Son of God, the resurrection as divine miracle, faith as the path to salvation. Everything Vrelith said contradicts that. Reduces it to misunderstood technology, strips away the supernatural and replaces it with extraterrestrial intervention. But does it? I keep coming back to that question. If everything Vrelith said is true, does it actually contradict anything fundamental? Jesus still taught love, still taught unity, still demonstrated capabilities beyond normal human limits, still died and returned, still spoke of eternal life and divine presence. The mechanism changes, the source changes, but the core message stays the same. Consciousness is eternal. Love is fundamental. We are all connected to something greater than ourselves. Does it matter if that something is a divine being or a fundamental field of reality? Does it matter if Jesus was the son of a god or the son of an advanced being trying to elevate humanity? The teachings remain. The impact remains. The transformation of billions of lives remains. I've been digging since the day Vrelith died. Not officially. Not as part of any sanctioned investigation. On my own time. Using resources I'm probably not supposed to access. Looking for anything that might support or contradict what she told us. The historical record is full of gaps. Places where the narrative doesn't quite make sense. Jesus' missing years. The sudden appearance of complex theological concepts. The reports of angels and divine visitors that populate every major religion. UFO sightings that cluster around sacred sites. Genetic anomalies in ancient human. Remains that suggest hybridization events. None of it proves anything. All of it could be explained conventionally. But when you put it together, when you look at the pattern, it starts to look like what Vrelith described. Consistent intervention over thousands of years. Gradual elevation of human consciousness. Preparation for something. I found a report from 1967, classified until 2003, a crash site in Russia. Biological material recovered that showed non-terrestrial origin and genetic compatibility with human DNA. The report was buried. The samples disappeared. But it's there in the archives if you know where to look. I found references in Sumerian texts to beings who came from the sky and taught humanity agriculture, mathematics, astronomy. The descriptions match Vrelith's people. Tall, strange proportions. Knowledge beyond what the civilization should have possessed. I found Analysis of Jesus' teachings from comparative religion scholars who noticed parallels with concepts from cultures that had no contact with each other. Universal ideas, consciousness, unity, the divine within. As if someone was spreading the same message across multiple civilizations simultaneously. 3 months after Vrelith died, I received an email. Anonymous sender. Encrypted. It contained genetic data from the fetus. Complete sequencing. The human DNA came from a man named David Reeves, who died of an aggressive cancer in Boston 7 months before Vrelith's capture. 34 years. Old. Software engineer. No family. The obituary mentioned he'd traveled extensively in his 20s. South America, Southeast Asia. Always alone. I haven't been able to confirm if he ever knew, if Vrelith told him what she was, if he understood that his child would be proof of something that would change everything. The data is real. I've had it independently verified by 3 separate geneticists who don't know each other and don't know what they're looking at. They all confirm the same thing. The fetus carried human DNA and something else. Something that shouldn't exist. I keep coming back to one thing Vrelith said. That Jesus was retrieved. That he didn't stay dead because his people had the technology to restore him. If that's true, if that's even possible, it changes everything and nothing at the same time. It means resurrection is real. Life after death is real. Everything Christians have believed for 2,000 years is real, just not supernatural, natural, advanced. Technology and biology so far beyond ours that our ancestors could only interpret it as divine. But here's what keeps me awake. If Vrelith was telling the truth, if her people have been guiding humanity for thousands of years, where are they now? She said they were dying, that the plague was spreading, that she was one of the last. Are they gone? Did they finish their mission and leave us to develop on our own? Or are there still some out there, watching, waiting to see if we'll figure it out? I've started looking for patterns in current events, places where human development makes inexplicable leaps, individuals who seem to understand things they shouldn't, technologies that appear fully formed without clear antecedents. I found a physicist in Geneva who published a paper on consciousness as a quantum field. The math is beyond me, but experts say it's revolutionary. Explains phenomena that standard neuroscience can't account for. She's 28 years old, published her first paper at 19. When I looked into her background, I found gaps, years where there's no record of where she was or what she was doing. I found a teacher in Tanzania who's been working with children in remote villages, teaching them concepts that usually require years of education, mathematics, philosophy, ethical frameworks. The kids test off the charts. Universities are taking notice. The teacher appeared in the area 6 years ago. No history before that, no records. Just showed up one day and started teaching. I'm probably seeing patterns that aren't there, making connections that don't exist. That's what happens when you spend too much time looking at data that might not mean anything. But I can't stop, because if Vrelith was right, everything changes. Not just religion, not just science, everything. Our understanding of who we are, where we came from, where we're going. The entire trajectory of human civilization becomes part of something larger, a preparation, a cultivation, an elevation towards something we can't yet fully comprehend. And if she was wrong, if this is all just the delusion of a dying alien trying to make sense of her own tragedy, then we're alone. We've always been alone. And every experience of the divine, every moment of transcendence, every teaching that points toward something greater is just us, just humanity, creating meaning in a universe that doesn't care. I don't know which possibility disturbs me more. The organization that employed me no longer exists. Orbital Dynamics Limited dissolved 4 months after Vrelith's death. Assets liquidated. Employees scattered. My security clearance was revoked. I work freelance now. Database management, systems analysis, quiet work that doesn't attract attention. But I kept the files, every report, every image, every piece of data from those 3 weeks. It's encrypted. Hidden across multiple servers in multiple countries. If something happens to me, it's set to release automatically. Not to the media, not to governments, to researchers, scientists, theologians, people who might know what to do with it. I've thought about releasing it myself, just uploading everything and letting the world decide. But I've seen what happens when information like this becomes public. It gets weaponized, distorted, turned into propaganda for whatever ideology wants to claim it. Vrelith's message would disappear under layers of interpretation and agenda. So I wait, and I watch. And I look for signs that someone else knows, that someone else is paying attention, that I'm not the only one who understands what that Tuesday morning discovery really meant. Last week I received another email. Same encryption, same anonymous sender. No text, just a single image file. It was a photograph. Old, degraded. Looked like it was taken in the 1940s based on the quality and processing. It showed a group of people standing in front of a building I didn't recognize. 7 individuals. 6 looked completely normal. The 7th, standing in the back, partially obscured by shadow, had proportions that weren't quite right. Hands that seemed too long, features that didn't quite resolve into a coherent face. I ran facial recognition, gait analysis, biometric comparison against every database I could access. The 6 normal-looking people came back with matches. Scientists, all of them, working on the Manhattan Project. The 7th person returned no matches, no records, nothing. I spent 4 days enhancing the image, isolating the figure, analyzing every pixel. The more I looked, the more convinced I became that the 7th person wasn't human. The proportions were wrong in the same ways Vrelith's had been wrong. The stance suggested a biology that didn't quite fit human parameters. And when I finally got a clear enough image of the hands, I could count the fingers. 6 on each hand. I don't know who sent me that image. I don't know what it means. But it suggests that Vrelith's people have been here longer than she said. That they were involved in more than just religious teaching. That they shaped human development at critical moments. The Manhattan Project created the atomic bomb, changed warfare, changed politics, changed the entire trajectory of human civilization. What if that wasn't entirely our achievement? What if someone was there, guiding, suggesting, helping us develop the technology we'd need for whatever comes next? I'm going to keep looking, keep collecting data, keep searching for the pattern underneath the pattern, because that's what Vrelith asked for. Not blind faith, not unquestioning acceptance, investigation, analysis, the application of our scientific method to questions we've always assumed were purely theological. Maybe that's the real message. Not that Jesus was an alien, not that God is a quantum field, but that faith and reason aren't opposed. That seeking truth through evidence and seeking truth through spiritual experience can lead to the same place. That the divide between science and religion is artificial, imposed by us, not by whatever truth underlies both. I don't know if I'll ever find definitive proof. I don't know if proof even exists. Vrelith said consciousness persists after death, said Jesus proved it through resurrection. If that's true, I'll know eventually. We all will. Until then, all I can do is look and question and try to understand what a dying alien meant when she said humanity was ready. Ready for what exactly? That's the question that drives everything now. Ready for contact? Ready for inclusion in some galactic community? Ready for technologies that would seem like magic? Ready for the truth about our own origins? Or ready for something else entirely? Something Vrelith didn't explain because we don't have the framework to understand it yet. I think about David Reeves sometimes. The human father who never knew his child would be proof of something extraordinary, Did he notice anything unusual about Vrelith? Did he sense something different? Or did her technology hide it completely? And when the cancer killed him, did he know? Did he understand in those final moments that death wasn't the end? I think about Jesus, about the resurrection accounts, the descriptions of his post-resurrection body, how he could appear and disappear, pass through locked doors, seem physical, but not quite. Everything attributed to divine miracle. But what if it was exactly what Vrelith described? A restored body, biology repaired by technology we don't possess, proof of concept for everything he'd taught about eternal life. Does that make it less miraculous? Or more? I can't answer that. What I can do is keep looking for the next piece, the next data point, the next indication that Vrelith was telling the truth, or that she was desperately trying to give meaning to her own death. The geneticists I consulted are getting curious, asking questions about where the samples came from. One of them, Dr. Rachel Kim from Stanford, sent me a paper she's drafting, analysis of anomalous genetic sequences in ancient human remains. She's found markers that don't fit standard evolutionary models, segments of DNA that appear to have been introduced from outside the normal inheritance pattern. She doesn't know what it means, but she's asking the right questions. I haven't told her about Vrelith. Not yet, but I think eventually I will, when I'm certain she can handle it, when I'm certain she won't dismiss it, or weaponize it, or reduce it to something that fits existing paradigms. The truth, if it is truth, deserves better than that. Vrelith said her people were dying, that the plague was killing them, that her child was meant to be part of their survival strategy. If that's accurate, if they're really gone or dying, what does that mean for us? Were we their legacy, their final project, the species they hoped would carry forward whatever mission they were pursuing? Or were we just one experiment among many, a promising development that didn't pan out quite as hoped? I've found references to similar intervention patterns in other contexts. Ancient civilizations that appeared fully formed with no clear developmental path, technologies that emerged too quickly, knowledge that seemed to come from nowhere. Egypt, Sumer, the Indus Valley, Mesoamerica, all of them showing signs of sudden advancement, all of them with mythologies about visitors from the sky bringing knowledge. What if it was all part of the same program? Multiple intervention points across different cultures, different teachers, different approaches, all aimed at elevating humanity to some threshold. And what if we're at that threshold now? Vrelith said it was time, that humanity was ready. But ready for what? She died before explaining, before giving us the roadmap, before telling us what comes next, unless she did tell us, and I'm just not understanding it yet. She said consciousness is fundamental, that it's a field, not a product, that what we call God is this field expressing itself through life. If that's true, if consciousness is woven into the fabric of reality itself, then everything we experience as spiritual or transcendent is us connecting with that fundamental layer. Prayer, meditation, mystical experiences, near-death experiences, all of it, all real, all accessing something that actually exists, not metaphor, not delusion, interface with a real phenomenon that science hasn't properly categorized yet. The physicist in Geneva is working on exactly this. Consciousness as quantum phenomenon, non-local, entangled, persistent beyond biological death. Her math suggests it's possible, more than possible, probable. If she's right, if consciousness really does persist, then Vrelith was right about Jesus, about resurrection, about eternal life, not as supernatural event, as natural consequence of how reality is structured. That would change everything. Death wouldn't be an ending, it would be a transition, a change of state, biology falling away, consciousness persisting in the field, available, accessible, potentially even interactive. Is that what Jesus was demonstrating? Is that what the resurrection accounts were trying to convey? Not that he defied natural law, but that natural law includes possibilities we haven't discovered yet. I keep coming back to this. Turning it over. Looking at it from different angles. If Vrelith was telling the truth, then 2,000 years of Christianity have been both right and wrong. Right about the core truths, wrong about the mechanism, right about eternal life and divine presence, wrong about supernatural intervention. How would the world respond to that? How would billions of believers reconcile their faith with a material explanation for the divine? Some wouldn't. Some would reject it entirely, insist that removing the supernatural removes the meaning, that a technological resurrection is less meaningful than a miraculous one. But others might see it differently, might recognize that the truth is more profound than the mechanism. That whether Jesus was resurrected by God or by advanced beings with medical technology beyond our understanding, the message remains. Death is not final. Consciousness persists. Love is fundamental. The core doesn't change. I wish I could talk to Vrelith again. Ask the questions I've accumulated over these months. Get clarification on the details that keep me awake. But she's gone. If her own teachings are correct, if consciousness persists, then she's still out there somewhere, in the field, accessible through methods we don't understand yet. Maybe that's my next investigation, not evidence of alien intervention, but evidence of persistent consciousness, ways to detect it, interface with it, confirm that death really is just transition. Dr. Kim would help with that. So would others. I've identified 17 researchers worldwide working on aspects of this question. None of them know about each other. None of them have the full picture. But if I could bring them together, share the data, give them Vrelith's message and let them approach it scientifically, without agenda, without preconception, what would they find? That's the question that might actually matter more than whether Vrelith was lying or telling the truth. Because even if she was lying, even if every word was fabrication, the questions she raised are still valid. The investigations she suggested are still worth pursuing. The possibility that consciousness is fundamental and persistent is still worth testing. And if it's true, if we can prove it empirically, then it doesn't matter whether aliens taught Jesus or whether he was exactly what traditional Christianity claims. The result is the same. We're eternal. We're connected. Death is transition. Love is fundamental. Everything else is just details. I'm going to keep digging, keep connecting data points, keep looking for the pattern. But I'm also going to start building something else, a network, researchers who are willing to ask these questions seriously, who have the expertise and the intellectual courage to challenge assumptions. Because that's what Vrelith asked for. Not faith, not worship, not unquestioning acceptance, investigation, analysis, the courage to follow evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads to conclusions that transform everything we thought we knew about ourselves, our history, and our future. I'll let you know what I find. If you've had experiences that might relate to this, if you've found evidence of intervention in human development that doesn't fit standard historical models, if you're a researcher working on consciousness studies or genetic anomalies in ancient populations, if you've noticed patterns that suggest something guiding human civilization toward a specific threshold, reach out. Maybe together we can see what I can't see alone. Maybe together we can understand what Vrelith really meant when she said it was time. And maybe, if we're very careful and very thorough, we can find out if she was telling the truth about the most important claim of all. That consciousness doesn't end. That part of us, the essential part, continues. That we'll all find out eventually what lies on the other side of biology. But until then, all we can do is look. And look. Question. And try to build a framework that's large enough to hold both the material and the transcendent. both the scientific and the spiritual, both the human and whatever else we might be. I rescued a pregnant alien on a Tuesday morning. She told me things about Jesus that I'm still trying to understand. And she changed how I see everything, not because I believe her without question, but because she gave me questions worth asking. And that might be the real message, not answers. Questions. The kind that open doors instead of closing them. The kind that expand possibility instead of limiting it. The kind that might eventually, if we're brave enough to pursue them, lead us to truths that transcend the boundary between faith and reason, between human and alien, between mortal and eternal. I don't know yet. But I'm going to find out. 2120. I thought I'd found everything there was to find. 4 months of investigation, 17 researchers identified, patterns mapped across 3,000 years of human history, evidence compiled, questions formulated. Then Dr. Kim sent me something that unraveled it all. She'd been running genetic analysis on samples from Denisovan remains, ancient human relatives whose DNA shows up in modern populations but whose origins remain mysterious. She was looking for markers that might explain the rapid cognitive development in early Homo sapiens. The unexplained leap that took us from tool users to civilization builders in an evolutionary eye blink. She found Vrelith's markers, not identical, but close enough. Genetic sequences that matched the non-terrestrial elements in the fetal sample I'd provided her. Present in Denisovan DNA at low concentrations, less than 2%. But there, measurable, undeniable. This doesn't make sense, her email said. Denisovans went extinct 50,000 years ago. If your sample is recent, how do we explain the same markers in both populations? Cross-contamination, convergent evolution, or something else? I stared at that email for 40 minutes before responding. Because if Vrelith's people had been intervening for 50,000 years, everything she'd told me was understated. This wasn't a few thousand years of religious guidance. This was systematic genetic modification across the entire span of modern human development. This was us being created, not just guided. I called Kim. She answered on the first ring. "Where did you get that sample?" she asked. No greeting, no preamble, just straight to the question that had probably kept her awake since running the analysis. "I can't tell you yet, but I need you to run another test. Compare those markers against genetic data from populations in specific geographic regions." "Which regions?" "Everywhere Jesus and other religious founders operated. Middle East, India, China, South America. Anywhere you find reports of divine teachers or prophets appearing with advanced knowledge." "That's not how genetic studies work. I need specific populations. Specific..." "Dr. Kim, Rachel, please, just run it. Look for concentration patterns. See if the markers cluster in areas with religious significance." She was silent for a long time. "You're suggesting directed intervention, intentional genetic modification, targeted at specific populations." "I'm suggesting we look at the data and see what it shows." 3 weeks later, she sent me a map. The markers were everywhere, but the concentrations were higher in specific regions: Jerusalem, Varanasi, Tibet, the Yucatan, Egypt. Exactly where you'd expect if someone was systematically introducing genetic material into populations that would produce religious leaders. Not random, not natural distribution, deliberate. "This is impossible," Rachel said when I called. "This suggests intervention on a scale that would require thousands of contact events over tens of thousands of years. The logistics alone..." "What if they lived here?" I interrupted. "Not visiting, not periodic contact, actually living among us, breeding with us, generation after generation. Then we'd see more than 2%. We'd see saturation, unless they were managing the concentration, keeping it low enough to introduce beneficial traits without overwhelming human genetics. Selective breeding programs that looked like natural reproduction." Rachel didn't respond immediately. I could hear her breathing, thinking. That would make us a hybrid species, she said, finally. Not purely terrestrial, part human, part something else. It would mean our entire evolutionary history is artificial, guided, designed. It would mean we were their project, from the beginning. I heard something that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. Jesus. This is about Jesus. You think he was part of this? Another genetic introduction. Vrelith said he was a hybrid, human mother, non-human father. If that's true, and if they've been doing this for 50,000 years, he wasn't the first. He was one of many, maybe one of the last. Why the last? Because Vrelith said her people were dying, that the plague was killing them. If they're gone or nearly gone, there are no more interventions, no more genetic introductions, no more prophets or teachers appearing with knowledge that shouldn't exist. Rachel was quiet for almost a minute. We need more data. Samples from historical figures. DNA from relics. If we could get genetic material from anything connected to Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad or any of the major religious founders, that's impossible. There's nothing left. No verified remains. No. The Shroud of Turin. I felt something cold settle in my chest. That's been tested. It's medieval. Carbon dating puts it at 1300 CE. The carbon dating tested the patches, repairs made after a fire, not the original cloth. There have been calls to retest using modern methods, genetic analysis. If there's biological material on that shroud, if it really did wrap a body, we could extract DNA. The church would never allow it. They might, if we approached it correctly, not as debunking, as verification, confirming the shroud's authenticity through scientific means. They've been fighting accusations of fraud for decades. Hard evidence would end that. And if the DNA shows non-terrestrial markers, then we'd know Vrelith was telling the truth. I thought about that, about the implications, about what it would mean for 2 billion Christians to learn that Jesus was exactly what he claimed to be, but not in the way they'd understood. Son of God. Not metaphor, not theological construct. Literal truth. Offspring of a being from beyond earth. Divine in the sense of being more than human. But not supernatural. Natural. Just operating on biology we don't possess. There's another possibility, I said. What if the DNA shows normal human markers? What does that mean? That Vrelith was lying, or confused, or that Jesus was fully human and the resurrection accounts are either fictional or we're missing something about how they achieved it. But the Denisovan markers, the population clusters, the pattern of intervention, that's real regardless of what the shroud shows. Yes, that's real. That's measurable. But it doesn't tell us about Jesus specifically. Doesn't confirm or deny Vrelith's claim that he was one of them. I pulled up my files. The recording of Vrelith's message, her face as she spoke, the certainty in her voice. She was dying, I said. She knew she was dying. People don't lie when they're dying. Not about things like this. People believe things that aren't true, especially when facing death, especially when trying to give meaning to tragedy. She lost her child. She was alone. Dying in a space station far from home. Maybe she constructed a narrative that made it mean something, that made her suffering part of something larger. I hadn't considered that. The possibility that Vrelith's entire message was grief-driven delusion, a dying mother trying to make sense of losing her child by connecting it to humanity's savior. Then how do we explain the genetic markers? I asked. How do we explain 50,000 years of intervention? We don't know it's intervention. We know there are anomalous genetic sequences in ancient populations. We know they're concentrated in specific regions. But we're interpreting that as deliberate. It could be something else. Environmental factors, unknown evolutionary pressures, contamination from an unknown terrestrial source. You don't believe that? No, I don't. But I'm trained to consider alternatives. To not leap to conclusions just because they're exciting. I respected that, needed that, because I'd been living inside this investigation for months, and when you're inside something, you lose objectivity. You start seeing patterns that confirm what you want to believe. What do we do? I asked. We expand the research, carefully. We bring in more people, not everyone. Not yet. But specialists who can help us verify or falsify the hypothesis. Geneticists, historians, anthropologists. We build a proper study, peer review, multiple independent analyses. We do this right. That could take years. Yes, it could. But if Vralith's claim is true, if this is real, it's been happening for 50,000 years. A few more years of investigation won't matter. She was right. But I felt the urgency anyway. The sense that time was running out, that something was approaching and we needed to understand before it arrived. Vralith said humanity was ready, I said. Ready for what? I don't know. Maybe she meant ready to discover this, ready to understand our own origins, ready to handle the truth without it destroying us. And are we? Ready? Rachel laughed, actually laughed. Absolutely not. This would destabilize every major religion, undermine every assumption about human uniqueness, create political chaos. Some people would embrace it. Others would reject it violently. It would tear societies apart. Then maybe we shouldn't. No, we have to. Because the truth doesn't care about our readiness. It exists independent of our ability to handle it. And keeping it hidden because we're afraid of the consequences is the worst possible option. I knew she was right. But I also knew what releasing this information would do. The upheaval, the conflict, the violence that would emerge from people whose entire worldview was being threatened. We need a plan, I said, for how to release it, who to tell first, how to frame it so it doesn't cause maximum damage. Agreed, but first we need to be certain, absolutely certain, which means more data, more verification, more evidence. I spent the next 6 weeks compiling everything I had, every report from Vralith's capture and autopsy, every genetic analysis, every pattern I'd identified. Rachel did the same from her end. By the time we were done, we had a data set that was both overwhelming and incomplete. Overwhelming because it showed clear evidence of non-terrestrial genetic influence on human evolution. Incomplete because we couldn't definitively prove the mechanism or the intent. We brought in Dr. James Harrison, an evolutionary biologist from Cambridge who specialized in human origins. We gave him the data without context. Just the genetic markers and population distributions. Asked him to explain what he was seeing. He spent 4 days analyzing it before calling us. This looks like a breeding program, he said. Selective introduction of specific traits into populations over thousands of generations. But the source population isn't in the data. Where did these markers come from? That's what we're trying to determine, Rachel said. Well, they didn't evolve naturally. The sequences are too complex, too specific. They look designed, like someone engineered them and then introduced them into the human genome systematically. Is that possible? Genetically engineering humans 50,000 years ago? Not with technology, we understand, but the evidence suggests it happened anyway. So either we're missing something about ancient human capabilities or someone else was involved. Someone non-human, I said. Harrison was quiet for a moment. That's the implication, yes. I didn't want to say it because it sounds insane, but I don't have a better explanation. We told him about Vralith. Everything, the pod, the dying alien, the message about Jesus, the genetic samples from her fetus, showing the same markers we were seeing in ancient populations. He listened without interrupting. When we finished, he asked a single question. Do you have the original biological samples? Not just genetic data, actual tissue. They were destroyed, I said. Security protocol. Everything was incinerated except the data. Convenient. That makes independent verification impossible. Are you saying we're lying? No. I'm saying extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And right now all we have is genetic data that suggests something extraordinary happened. We don't have the extraordinary evidence to prove what that something was. He was right. We had patterns, correlations, suggestive findings, but we didn't have proof. Not the kind that would convince the scientific community or the public. The Shroud of Turin, Rachel said. If we could get access. The church has refused every request for genetic sampling. They're not going to suddenly agree because 3 researchers asked nicely. What if we went public, I suggested. Released what we have. Let the pressure of public interest force the church to allow testing. That's a terrible idea, Harrison said. Immediately. The data would be picked apart, discredited, dismissed as contamination or misinterpretation. We'd lose credibility and gain nothing. Then what do? We keep looking for evidence, physical evidence, not just genetic markers, but actual artifacts, technology, anything that would prove contact occurred. I thought about the photograph. The Manhattan Project, the figure with 6 fingers. I may have something, I said. A photograph from 1945. Shows what might be one of Vrelith's people working on the atomic bomb project. May have, might be. That's not good enough. It's a start. I can try to find more. Personnel records, project documentation, anything that might identify who they were. Do it. And Rachel, keep working on the genetic angle. See if you can find living individuals with high concentrations of the markers. They might have information. Family. Histories. Stories passed down. What will you do? Rachel asked. I'm going to look at the historical record, religious texts, accounts of divine encounters, see if there are patterns that match what Vrelith described. Beings appearing, teaching, breeding with humans, then disappearing. If this has been happening for 50,000 years, there should be consistent reports. We divided the investigation. 3 branches, genetics, history, physical evidence, each of us following different threads toward the same question. Are we alone? Have we ever been alone? And if not, what does that mean for everything we believe about ourselves? I started with the Manhattan Project photograph, ran it through every enhancement algorithm I could find. The figure in the back remained unclear, deliberately obscured, or just badly positioned for the camera. I accessed personnel records, thousands of people worked on that project, scientists, technicians, support staff, all documented, all accounted for, except 7. 7 individuals who appeared in photographs but had no corresponding personnel files, no background checks, no security clearances, no records of where they'd come from or where they went afterward. 7 people who contributed to the development of nuclear weapons and then vanished from history. I found 3 more photographs, different locations, different dates, but showing the same pattern. Figures in the background, features obscured, proportions slightly wrong, and hands, when visible, showing 6 fingers. They'd been there, at one of the most critical moments in human history, helping us develop technology that would define the next century. And then they'd disappeared. Why nuclear weapons? Why that specific technology? Vrelith said they were preparing us, elevating us. But for what? Nuclear capability nearly destroyed us. We came within minutes of extinction during the Cold War. How was that preparation? How was that elevation? Unless it was a test, can humanity develop planet-destroying technology and choose not to use it? Can we stand on the brink of annihilation and step back? Can we hold that much power and exercise restraint? We did. Barely. But we did. Maybe that was the point. Maybe that was the threshold Vrelith talked about. Not technological capability, moral capability. The ability to possess ultimate power and choose not to. Abuse it. I found another pattern. Space programs. Individuals with no clear background appearing at critical moments in NASA, in the Soviet program, in private aerospace companies, always in technical roles, always contributing knowledge that advanced development, always disappearing after the project reached a milestone. They'd helped us get to space, helped us develop the technology to leave our planet, helped us reach the point where we could encounter them on something closer to equal terms, not as primitive natives to be observed, but as a species capable of understanding, capable of joining whatever community existed out there. Rachel called with an update on the genetic research. I found 12 individuals with marker concentrations above 5%, scattered across different countries, different ethnicities, but all showing the same pattern, and all of them report family. Histories of unusual abilities. What kind of abilities? Enhanced pattern recognition, intuitive understanding of complex systems, what they describe as just knowing things without learning them, and something else, something they're reluctant to talk about. What? Experiences of consciousness beyond their bodies, out-of-body experiences, sensing things at a distance, communication without words, all things that sound like pseudoscience until you realize 12 unconnected individuals are describing the same phenomena.